So it's a beautiful day today here in Tasmania, and I think how fortunate we are here in Australia, where we have some form of free healthcare. It's slowly being destroyed by various governments, in particular at this point the Scott Morrison government, who has been whittling away at it, and eventually they do intend to have a US-style healthcare system, which would be a disaster, of course, as it is a disaster in the United States. And you can hear so many stories by people who have been victims of this US healthcare system. It's just neoliberalism run amok, and they're taking people's money and not giving them much back. And people that cannot afford to even give money, well, they just have to basically get sicker and sicker, and eventually people die. 260 people a day die due to lack of healthcare or the lack of ability to be able to pay for medicines like insulin, because they are charging, ridiculous amounts of money that people can't afford. People can't afford to pay their premiums, and if they can afford to just scrape by with the premiums, then they get very little in return for that.
Well, they didn't even promise to fight for Medicare for all. AOC did. And she has 12 million Twitter followers. All the combined work over the past several months that I've seen from organizers, many of them here, to put together these marches, if AOC had put out one tweet, the size of those marches, or God forbid, committed to organizing and activism. She ran not to be a politician, she ran to be an activist and an organizer who happened to be in office. Yeah. Imagine if she had committed herself to organizing the march. Imagine, why is it that people, I know, when you get into Congress, you get a $174,000 salary, you get a pension after 5 years, you get the best health care in the world, but the rest of us are still suffering. If AOC had actually committed, or the squad members, they have millions of followers, the ability to get press, attention, anytime, and they were supposed to be our extension of the movement in Congress, fighting to represent us. Not just accountable to the party leadership, to the corporate party leadership. What good does it do to have representatives in office who don't take corporate money if they're listening to the politicians that do? If she had committed herself to organizing, or the other squad members had committed themselves to organizing, to bringing people out to these marches, they could have been 10 times, 100 times bigger. That's the power they have. Injustice isn't just the misuse of power, it is failing to use your power for good. Yeah. Martin Luther King said, at the end of the day, what we will remember is not what our enemies have said, but the silence of our friends. Yep. True story. What has the squad done? Let's think about what the squad's done since they took power. They don't need full majorities. Right now, they have enough representatives in the House to dictate whether the Democratic Party is going to pass something. And you know what? Bernie Sanders, who I worked for in 2016 as the National Political Outreach Coordinator, he hasn't as many votes as Joe Manchin does. He could make the same demands. Why isn't he doing it? Why not? Why does it take people who are struggling to painstakingly pitch together events to fight for their rights, rather than it being the people who we specifically sent there to do it? Right. So let's look at what the squad and AOC in particular have done. They had an opportunity to force the vote for a floor vote on Medicare for all in December. All they had to do was leverage the vote for Speaker Pelosi. Imagine how popular that fight would have been if they'd taken it public. Guess what? Nancy Pelosi, one of the most disliked politicians in the entire country, is standing between you and not even Medicare for all, health care for everyone as a human right, which our country is the only major country on earth that doesn't have it, but she is standing in between you and even voting on that. Yeah. AOC, when she was asked, just a year ago, she was asked whether the Democratic Party, what is its ideological character? And she said, she actually went out of her way, and she said, we don't have a left party in this country. The Democratic Party is a center conservative to a conservative party. And when she was and then she thought for a minute, how can I best illustrate that? And it was incredible. It was in the moment. She said, we can't even get a floor vote on Medicare for all. So this isn't a left party. This is a conservative party. That's how she chose to illustrate it. Well, guess what? A year later, she had the opportunity to be the one to get us that floor vote, and she didn't do it. What does that say about her according to her own classification? It says that something happens to you when you get into the Democratic Party. Nobody goes into the Democratic Party and comes out further left. It's systemic. It's structural. That's what we need to change. That's why we helped organize this as the Movement for a People's Party. That's why we participated in a big way in the marches for Medicare for all. That's why we were the only major national organization that helped organize Force the Vote. As much respect as I have for organizations like DSA, who have it in their own strategy manual to achieve Medicare for all through a floor vote, they didn't go for it. They weren't there in the end, and they weren't here now either. But guess what? For 5 years, Bernie Sanders set the benchmark. He planted the flag for this movement, and as the Democratic Party actually has for decades before him, and he used and elevated the idea of healthcare as a human right as the quintessential injustice in this country. He ran on Medicare for all first and foremost. Well, you can't plant that flag for 5 years. And then, when the Democrats take full majorities in the House, Senate, and the presidency, decide that you're going to walk away from that. We remember, it was a few months ago, and we still need it. You can't back away from those promises. Remember when they told us push Biden left? Yeah, elect Biden, then we'll push him left. That's not what's happening. That's a classic tall tale. We hear it all the time. Obama ran on Medicare for all. Nancy Pelosi was for Medicare for all. Jerry Brown was for Medicare for all. The list goes on and on and on and on. Medicare for all is an election ploy that the Democrats have used for decades to hook people who are desperate to get them voting for them long enough so that when they have a full majority again, they can abandon it as quickly as they campaigned on it. And what we have unfortunately discovered in recent months is that doesn't end with the politicians that are taking corporate money. It extends even to our friends in office, even to the squad members, unfortunately, who we want so much to believe in. I wanted very much to believe that they were going to force the vote. When AOC, Cori Bush withheld their votes, there was a glimmer of hope. Someone's going to fight for us. But they didn't. And they didn't do it on a $15 minimum wage either. And they didn't call Biden out when he abandoned even the public option. And then they gave him an A. Pramila Jayapal gave him an A, a grade A for abandoning even his moderate promises. Forget the progressive promises. The moderate promises. An A plus. An A plus. But AOC, she went even further. She went even further. Pramila Jayapal said, I give him an A+. AOC, she spoke for the whole movement. She said, progressive, he has exceeded progressives' expectations. For all of it, does that ring true with you? No. Has Biden exceeded your expectations? No. Send her a message. Has Biden exceeded your expectations? No. So why are you giving him cover, AOC? Why are you giving him cover as a squad? You are permitting them to move to the right. You are permitting them. And some of us don't have the luxury to allow that to happen.
So that's really, really hideous, and it's so sadistic, and yet that's what's coming to to pretty much all Western countries. And you know, if these powers that be can just have everybody in a state of sickness and also basically only being able to do jobs that are poorly waged because they've destroyed unions and want to destroy unions, then they will continue that way. So this is where we're at now with basically the oligarchy thinking they've got everything sewn up, and that they think that they've managed to make it so that there's a duopoly in the US that it doesn't matter which party you vote for, the policies will continue on, neoliberalism will continue on, US imperialism will continue on, and so forth. So that's why we have to develop a people's movement, because we can't vote our way out of this. And why am I interested in what happens in the US? Because everything that happens in the US is like a test case for what happens here in Australia and other Western countries. The US is a test case. And the US also is basically dictating our foreign policy. So that's why I focus on the US. It's at the epicenter of violence in the world, and it's at the epicenter of the most awful end-stage ecocidal capitalism. So when I watched this march today and the speeches at the march by Status Quo was filming those speeches outside Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's office in the Bronx, I think it is. And there was Susan Sarandon was there. She's such amazing. She's a celebrity, and yet she's actually doing really great work and actually financially supporting different I think there's some leftist journalists that are being supported by her financially a little bit, and she's also doing what she can to help Stephen Donziger. There's all different things that she's doing and things we'll probably never know about. She's great. Normally I don't ever talk about celebrities as in being of any benefit, but she definitely is one celebrity that is. It would help if she was rejected capitalism, and maybe she does, I don't know, but I think for example, the Movement for a People's Party, they don't outright reject capitalism, and I think at this point everybody should do that. All parties should do that. Any third party, rather, should just reject capitalism outright. So then there was Joy Marie Mann, and she has 85% of her eyesight has been lost just suddenly. She has a particular disease that is very ruthless, and so she is dealing with this sudden loss of eyesight, and she's quite disabled in that way. She says she has to ask her husband to plug in her phone for her and that kind of thing. She's really struggling, and she needs a certain amount of money every month to be able to deal with this particular disease. Is she able to? No, because in the United States, free healthcare, Medicare for all, is seen as some sort of privilege as opposed to the right. It is a right that people should have free healthcare. So she's struggling terribly.
I have been doxxed. I have been threatened. I have been told that people will call Social Security and tell them I'm lying about being blind. I have been harassed. I have been called every name in the book just for wanting people to have health care. This is all I want. And the fact that those of us who are fighting for this are being attacked like we are horrible people for wanting to help humanity is unjust, it's ugly, and it's inhumane. And I'm sick of watching so many people do it. You don't have to join us, but stop disrespecting us. It is ableist as fuck to come at disabled people and say, now is not the time. How dare you tell me when the time is? Are you going to pay my thousands of dollars in medical bills? Are you going to tell me it's okay when I get medical bills for $24,000 because every 30 days I need eye treatments? Are you going to pay these? Are you going to help me when I'm dealing with the trauma of all of a sudden not even so much as being able to walk without falling and walking into doors and walls and needing to ask my husband for help to do the littlest things like plug in my phone charger? Don't tell me I don't have a right to be upset. That takes audacity. I have every right to be upset because people who told me they were going to fight for people like me are not. This is about holding people accountable. If you think that me saying AOC hasn't tweeted about Medicare for all in months is an insult and an attack, ask yourself why. Why are you offended by that? Tell her you're offended by that because it's a fact. Don't get mad at me. I'm just pointing it out. I guess my main point is that We, the disabled people, deserve to have a life of dignity. We deserve respect. We deserve to be able to speak our minds and tell people that we are upset. We deserve to hold people accountable. We do not fucking need permission. You don't get to tell me what I can and cannot say and what I can be pissed about. It is my right. And you telling me different is ableist and privileged, and I'm done with it. That's it.
And she is one of many people who is in that position of basically, it's a life and death almost for a lot of people, and in many cases 260 a day people are dying because they cannot afford health care, they cannot afford health insurance, they cannot afford the medicines that they require, they cannot afford diagnostic procedures, they can't afford to have all the things that are required. You need regular health care, regular visits to the doctor, and particularly the older you get, to make sure that you can keep healthy. It's not enough to just go to the doctor when you suddenly feel sick, or when you get to some stage where you're have an advanced disease. To have good health, you need regular trips to the doctor. Of course, you need health. You need a good exercise regime, and you need a good diet, and that's where the ancillary benefits of veganism come in. Where if you're eating a plant-based diet, you're really set up well to actually be a balanced plant-based diet. You're set up well to have good health. And I'd invite you to check out nutritionfacts.org, which is science-backed, to find out what I mean by that. So there's all kinds of things, and not being impoverished. I mean, if you're struggling with, if you're having to work 2 or 3 jobs, and you don't have a living wage, basically, that's going to affect you health-wise. It's going to create stress and all of that. So all these factors, it's not just one thing, all these different factors, poverty, working in extreme conditions like Amazon or Frito-Lay, that dreadful, where people are working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in really awful conditions, not getting any real time off during the day. Those kinds of things, they're like 19th century type conditions that people are working in there. It's insane. That's why we need to hit these companies in the hip pocket, like Frito-Lay and Amazon, who are basically trying to make sure unions cannot recruit anybody to improve conditions. They basically want slave labor, just like what's in the private prisons, with literal slave labor in private prisons. The mass incarceration that Bill Clinton introduced in the 90s, and that the Democratic Party continues on supporting with their awful neoliberal policies, etc. All these things contribute to terrible health for the population, in particular black people and people of color who are living in poor areas, who are getting dreadful wages, and also the effects of having a militarized police, an occupational force, clamping down on you, killing you, somebody executed every other day or every day, a black person, just for being black. All those factors affect people's health outcomes, lack of regular diagnostic procedures, all that kind of thing. And this is what is happening in the US, and this is what all these different powers that be, particularly right neoconservative governments around in Western countries, want that kind of healthcare system for, because they get their pockets lined by the health insurance industries and the big pharma, and you can see the effects of big pharma and how they make sure that if anybody mentions anything that is counter to what they want people to buy and believe in or whatever, and even if it's science-backed, they don't want that out. They want to make as much profit from people being sick as they can. So, hearing these stories, and I'm just going to share a few from the Status Quo videos that were played, which are online right now. One from Joy Marie Mann, and another from, there's Joy Marie Mann, and there's 2 other people, and I didn't catch their names. One of them was talking about how this young person, I think this young girl, had to hold a lemonade stand. She was like 11 or something. She has some sort of neurological condition that requires surgery, and she was holding a lemonade stand so that she could afford to have the surgery. And this guy who was doing this speech was saying how insane that is.
One of these stories that sticks out to mind is about this little girl, 7-year-old little girl in Alabama, who had to go into business for herself and sell lemonade to save her life so she could afford life-saving brain surgery. And the corporate mainstream media ran off like as a good feel-good story. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like how
a feel-good story?
It's a nightmare. A complete fucking nightmare. Like, it's crazy, like, how this little girl had to, like, go into work and go into labor in order to save her own life. Like, as soon as the doctor told her that she needed brain surgery, there shouldn't be no issues of what kind of insurance she has or what's her parents' finances. She should have gotten that surgery right there and there.
That's why we doing this.
Absolutely. She should have gotten it, no questions asked. And it's not fair, it's not right. Especially, you know, someone as young, and essentially you're taking away, especially these young people's futures, and it's just not right. So we need to, you know, as the AOC has said, bring the fucking ruckus.
In this country, this is the richest country in the world, a child is having to hold a lemonade stand to pay for her life-saving surgery. I mean, if that isn't insane and the most sadistic kind of thing you could imagine, making it, you know, where a child feels they have to do that. That's robbing children of their childhood, robbing them of a future, because I cannot imagine that selling lemonade, unless people are incredibly generous, is going to be able to provide thousands and thousands of dollars so she can have that life-saving surgery. I mean, what kind of a fucking nightmare of a world have we got going when we've reached the point where corporations are far more important than people are, and corporations have literal personhood status as in the United States, in law. What kind of a SHIT show have we got going here? So I will show you a couple of those clips, and also there is a clip of a man, her father, who his son, I think, had depression, and he had health insurance or Medicaid or something, and he could not afford a $20 a $20 payment, and he got so depressed from struggling with the sort of the healthcare system as it is in the United States that he ended up killing himself because of a $20 thing that he couldn't afford. Basically, he drove his truck into a river and drowned, and he put his suicide note on Facebook.
The devaluation of life in this profit-driven health system that was exposed by Scott's story is disgusting, and it's inhumane.
That's right.
So Scott, thank you for coming all this way and telling your story.
We're here to say that human life is a right. Everybody has got the right to live. My son Danny was 29 years old. He had some problems. He'd come to live with me. After a couple of weeks, around the middle of March, he comes home and he goes, "Pops, I went to get my medicine refilled today and found out that my insurance has been canceled." The insurance he was on was Fidelis Care, part of the ACA's managed Medicaid program. I told Danny, "No worries, son. How much is it?" Tells me it's $250. It was a big deal. We didn't have $250. I told him, "Danny, not a big deal. You've got an appointment with your therapist in a couple of weeks. I'm sure she can help you out. In the meantime, you should call Fidelis and find out what's going on." When he called Fidelis, he found out he missed a $20 payment to his Medicaid program. The medication they cut him off of was risperidone. It had a known suicidal risk from withdrawals. 3 weeks later, on April 9th, I saw his suicide note on Facebook. He tells us, "I can't get above this pain, and I've decided death by drowning. I've superglued my seatbelt shut. Checked it twice. I don't have the strength to open it. I'm sorry for hurting those who care. Daniel and Hazel, those were his children. I'm so fucking sorry." And he drove his truck into the Mohawk River. This ain't right. My son was on Medicaid. Medicaid, a program for the poorest and sickest among us. Centene is the one who owns Fidelis Care. they made $60.1 billion and had a 24% growth in 2018 after adding managed Medicaid. Fast forward to the year of pandemic, $111.8 billion, almost double their revenue during a pandemic. The faster we die, the more profits they make. This is disgusting. Every other country in the world guarantees health care as a human right. Here in America, we guarantee contracts that deny us health care. If you don't pay for that contract, they're now threatening us with a federal penalty. You either pay to get denied health care or you'll get penalized by our government. Our Vice President, Kamala Harris, shared Danny's story. I was thrilled. I was overjoyed. I thought she was really going to fight for us. 3 weeks later, she introduced her plan for corporations like Centene to sell us Medicare. She used Danny's story as a commercial for the ones who murdered him. Every time you hear a politician, they say they want to guarantee you access to health care. That's what they're selling you. A contract that will deny you care when you need it the most. This ain't right. We're going to continue to march. We're going to hit every single politician's office, and I will continue to fulfill my promise to my son. I will make our lawmakers look me in the eye, and they will see the consequences of their decisions. 262 people will die today because a medical treatment that is available was not affordable. That's 262 Dannys. That's 262 children, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, uncles. This is wrong. Why? Why do we have to be victimized by our country so that a few billionaires can get richer? My son's life was worth more than $20. Shalyn Villela, her life was worth more than $2,000. Alan, he died because he didn't have $250 for his insulin. His life was worth more than that. I could tell you about Abby, who was denied insulin. I could tell you about so many people who are dead and gone from us, and every single one of them was somebody's child. All 262 people is somebody's child every day here in America. We're going to continue to fight until we win, because no one fights alone, and that's the way we win this.
By the way, right now there's about 260 to 270 people dying a day for coronavirus. So the numbers are very close to how many people are dying from lack of health insurance and how many people are dying right now because of deaths by COVID.
So that father has to deal with that. I think the name of that person was Daniel Strong, Strong. And there'd be many stories just like that, where people eventually just can't, they are literally drowning. They cannot see a way out of things. They cannot see any hope, and they end up killing themselves. And there's tens of thousands of people do that in the United States every year. There's about 40,000 or more people kill themselves for various reasons, but most likely it would probably be just inability to deal with the neoliberal nightmare, the anti-people situation that we have developed through capitalism. It's untenable for people, and I talk about this often. I've talked about this many times on this channel, how you cannot put a happy face on capitalism. So we should stop trying. We should stop expecting people who are in neoliberal parties or neoconservative parties, who are all getting money from corporations, all sort of propping up corporations and allowing them to run the country. We should stop expecting these people, the squad in quotes, all those people who are, the AOC didn't bother to turn up to that Medicare for All march, even though she ran on that platform, getting Medicare for all for the people. What a load of rubbish that is. I don't know when people are going to stop expecting, a leopard to change their spots. It's that party is just one half of a gigantic big party that is serving corporations, that is serving the military-industrial complex, and they have no interest in serving the people whatsoever. And yes, it's good to have third parties like the People's Party, even though I wish they were socialist-leaning, or I wish they were abandon capitalism, period. I don't know if socialist or whatever, but abandon capitalism. I wish that any party that was a third party would do that. And yes, it's good to support that, but we can't vote our way out of this mess anymore. We require a movement, a people's movement, which is going to be forcibly crushed by the US government, by other governments in Western countries, etc. Any people's movement, just like in Cuba or in Venezuela or in Bolivia and in your own country, neoliberal and neoconservative governments are going to do their best to crush any people's movement. They're doing their best to try and crush Cuba. They're doing their best to try and crush Venezuela. They're doing their best to try and crush Bolivia. And they're doing their best to try and crush Mexico with the new president there, AMLO, who appears to be pushing against neoliberalism. Any country that has not submitted to the capitalist class, to the US empire, is going to feel the full force of the empire on them. But we have to do it anyway. The people's movement is necessary because as I say, we cannot vote our way out of it. They're making sure in the US that people who want change, who aren't satisfied with the status quo, making sure that they either can't vote, voter suppression is widespread, and if ever there was anybody who threatened the status quo in the United States, is never going to ever get anywhere near becoming president of the United States. And if they did by accident, they probably last a little while before some accident might happen to them, and that would be the end of them. I mean, look at what happened to JFK when he was thinking about ending the Vietnam War and thinking about dismantling the CIA. So anyway, despite things looking bleak, and despite the movement towards fascism, which you can see the US doing, and you can see it here in my country, Australia. It's not as advanced as the US, but it's going that way with the help of the Murdoch press. We have to keep fighting against these fascist impulses by these psychopaths and sociopaths in power, because otherwise you may as well just lay down and let it all happen. And I would rather not be here myself than have to live under a fascist dictatorship of some kind, which eventually that's what's going to happen if we don't push against it. It's something that we all have to do. We have to keep on doing. We have to support people. And there's one person I do want to mention that if you have any spare money that you can donate to. There's a person who has been a very tireless advocate for 9/11 responders. His name is John Gold. He has a video on his channel where he basically broke his back in 2013, and he was living independently and paying rent in a place. Then he got just recently, in just the last few months, he got he had to go to hospital, and he lost his apartment, and I think his family put him into this kind of almost, it's not a nursing home, but it's something like that. And he's 48 years old, and he doesn't have any money to be able to pay the deposit on getting another rental. He said if he could get the deposit and also have a month's rent or something, and then he might be able to then get some people in to help him with his life, because he's pretty much paralyzed. And this is the other thing, if he was living in a country where they cared about the people and they had free healthcare, he would be looked after. He would have people coming in and he wouldn't have to pay for it. Hopefully he won't have to pay for it if he gets into another rental. Hopefully that will be covered, but he needs rent and a down payment to be able to get out of this nursing home type situation. And he's 48 years old.
Dear friends, my name is John Gold. On May 22nd, 2013, I broke my back. I'm essentially half paralyzed from the waist down. At first, I spent 7 months in a nursing home until I managed to get on disability to be able to afford an apartment. I spent about 8 years in that apartment. It wasn't easy, but I managed to do it, even though I had problems cleaning and such. Recently, I got a wound on my foot. I also spent some time in the hospital and found out I have congestive heart failure. From the hospital, I went into a nursing home/rehab facility. My hope was that my foot would heal and I would go back into my apartment. Unfortunately, I couldn't afford to pay for my apartment and this facility at the same time. As a result, I lost my apartment. This facility is a glorified mental institution/prison. My family feels it's a safe place for me to be, so I'm not getting help from them to get out. I don't need to be in a facility like this. I am suffering from daily panic attacks, and I'm not getting proper help from this facility to deal with them. My foot is also not healing as it should be. I shouldn't be walking on it, and I'm forced to in order to go to the bathroom. If I manage to stay in bed, my urinal is not even emptied on a regular basis. I need a plan to get out of this facility. I'm only 48 years old. The thought of me rotting in this facility or a facility like this for the rest of my life is simply too much for me to bear. I'm making this video today to ask for help. My plan is to again get my own apartment and through Medicaid get someone to come by daily to help me with the areas of my life that I need help with. At least in that situation, I would have my freedom and wouldn't feel trapped. I've thought about it, and I probably need $2,000 for first and last month's rent, $1,000 for both food and medication, and $1,000 for a bed to sleep in and maybe some furniture. I hate asking for money, but in this situation, I don't have a choice. Those of you who know me know that I've sacrificed the last 20 years of my life advocating for the 9/11 first responders so they got the health care and funding that they needed. You know that I've done my best to advocate for truth, accountability, and justice for the 9/11 attacks, both for the 9/11 families and for the people of the world. If you can find it in your heart to help me, I could never pay you back, but I would be forever grateful. Please help me, and thank you for your time.
He has a GoFundMe, and I'm going to leave that in the information section of this video, and I hope that you will consider contributing to that. Yesterday, I think he had about $1,000. I think he needs about $5,000. He's a good person, and he's worked very hard and tirelessly for, as I mentioned, 9/11 responders, and I think it would be really great if people did their best to try and help him get out of this dire predicament and be able to live independently again. It's hard enough in that country when you have a sound body that you can see if you can get work, etc. But I mean, he's paralyzed, and now he's in this situation, which he's way too young to be in a situation like that. So these are so many stories that we'll never know, the countless stories of people's suffering and what they've gone through, what they had to go through, who killed themselves, and all this kind of thing. We will never know the suffering, and we have to do our best while we're trying to get rid of this awful capitalist scourge system, this ecocidal system. We have to do our best to try and support people while they're struggling within this system, and that includes not only trying to assist people financially if we can, and I know how difficult that is, particularly at a time in COVID where insecurity is everywhere, job insecurity, etc. But also we have to do our best to try and grow this people's movement and really challenge the oligarchy, basically make them afraid. I'm not talking about violence, but make them afraid. They're not afraid anymore of people, and they need to be.